right, everyone. Welcome back to the Fly Fishing Insider Podcast. I'm your host, Christian Bicassa. We got Nick Hall on the call this week. Nick, you started a whole new breed of fishing in Denver that I'm like super stoked on, and that's urban fishing. So we chatted a little bit before this, and you told me, hey, man, I fish 150 days a year. It's primarily urban fishing. I fish for trout, a lot of carp, other species, bass, etc. But your big thing is I like the urban environment and I like to find new areas. So we're super stoked to have you on. I know you work with a bunch of people, one of them which is Cheeky, others are with other manufacturers, etc. So you've built a great reputation, but your reputation, in my opinion, has been built around what I've seen on a lot of your Instagram posts, and that's just monster fish out of like drainage dishes and all kinds of crazy stuff. So we're super stoked about this. So today we're going to get you covered. We're going to talk about urban fishing in Denver, but not only urban fishing in Denver, but how it's applicable to all areas. I mean, you could go to Houston, Pittsburgh, Massachusetts, whatever, but there's always urban fishing. And that's something that's super cool because we all travel and you can get a line wet whenever you really want. And then the last bit, which I'm really excited about, is you've got something coming up. And by the time this show comes out, the results will be out. But there's a slam fishing for carp contest that you'll be attending. And you're going to give us some tips on how to fish for carp, what kind of setup to use, how to spot them, how to approach water, how to target them and fish for them, and et cetera. So I'm super stoked on this. This is going to be a great show, different kind of skill than a lot of people are used to, but let's just be frank about it. The masses of us are around cities and urban fishing. So hopefully this thing blows up and you got a little bit of competition out there to push you ahead. So how are things going, Nick?
Good, brother. I appreciate you having me, Christian. I'm super excited to get on here and talk about what I love doing is fishing in the city. I'm a city guy, born and raised in Baltimore and live in Denver. So I love being outside, and the city is close and convenient.
So wait a minute. We didn't come up with this at the beginning of the show, but you're a Baltimore Ray Lewis guy. I'm a Pittsburgh guy. God.
Yeah, man. I thought Kenny Pickett was going to be the truth. It didn't seem like that on Sunday.
His first game was horrible, but we won't go there. It's like being in the 90s again.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's too funny because, you're in Denver now, which is like the between the three of us, there's just a ton of animosity towards football, etc.
Yeah, for sure.
That's all right. We'll stick to fish today. So let's go there. We all love that.
Yeah, man.
But you travel around all Denver. I mean, you showed me, I loved it, a video on your Instagram where you literally walked up to a drainage ditch that had like not even 2 inches of water on it, pulled like a 24-inch rainbow off the ground. It was flopping around trying to get away from a bird and relocated it into deeper water. I mean, how did you come up with this passion and understanding of like, hey, I'm going to do this urban fishing thing and this is my way?
Yeah, so it's kind of funny. I got into fly fishing 3 years ago, and one of my buddies from back in West Virginia grew up fishing and kind of introduced me to it when he came out here to visit me when I first moved. And like for the first 2 years, I was fishing for trout, right? I just thought it was a cool thing to do. You always see, people fishing in the mountains for trout when they're fly fishing. It's just kind of this majestic sport. And my wife was pregnant last summer. And one of my buddies that I fish with out here, he's a Denver native. He's like, hey, dude, I got a kid. You're about to have a kid. Let's switch it up a little bit. Go fish for some carp. And it was on Father's Day weekend. And I'm like, all right. I'm like, I'm down. I've never done it before. Like I used to catch carp on, corn or worms back in the day on a conventional tackle, but never did it for fly fishing. And so I didn't have a rod or reel that was big enough. I was still using 5 weights. So he's like, oh, you can use my 6 or 7 and we'll go fish. So he took me over to this little this spot on the South Platte, and it was during the spawn. So, you see a bunch of tails out of the waters, head down, carp breaching.
Yeah.
And we spent 2 days on that Father's Day weekend fishing, and between the two of us, we caught about 20 carp. And so from that point on, I'm like, this is insane. I'm not used to the high altitude, even though I've been here for a while. So, when you fish for a trout, you bring the trout in and you're like, okay, this is easy. I got the trout in the net. I'm good. But when you fish for a carp, and that carp is, running 150,
Yeah.
200 yards downstream, and you're fighting them for 7 to 10 minutes, like you got to catch a breath afterward. And
Yeah.
that was kind of the excitement that drew me in, was like, wait, I can catch, you know, 10+ pound fish that
Yeah.
run you to backing on the first run and will run you to backing again, and just fight them. So, that's
And
kind of what drew me in.
yeah, and you can't horse them because you'll literally rip their lips off. I mean,
So,
it's like you gotta be enough of
uh
horsing, but not too much.
it's interesting in the urban environment, right? You have a lot of obstacles in the river. You've got, fallen trees. You've got shopping carts are big.
Yeah.
People just like to throw shopping carts in rivers. I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
You got a bunch of lime scooters in
Yeah.
and around the river. So like it's kind of a delicate balance of, you got to play the fish, but I like to use a little bit stronger line so I can horse them a little bit, so I don't
Uh-huh.
get stuck
Yeah.
in shopping carts and lose the fish. Because there's been times I fought a fish through 3 shopping carts and finally get them to the net, and your tippet's hanging on by a thread.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
definitely a delicate balance, but it's all sight fishing too, which is fun, right? I'm not a big fan of blind casting.
Yeah.
I like to walk the banks, scout out where the fish are, find the feeders, and that's what makes it fun. It's more of a hunt than fishing, right?
Yeah.
You're not just kind of throwing out and reeling in and stripping and drifting. You're
Yeah.
literally presenting the fly to the carp a couple inches away from their face, watch them eat it, set the hook, and then the fight is on.
Yeah. It's a spot and stock
Yeah, oh,
scenario.
definitely spot and stalk, right? There's a lot of technique to it, which I've only been fishing for carp since last June, and I'm kind of, I'm an obsessive personality. So when I
Right.
find something that I really like, I go full on and
Right.
dive really deep into it. I guess it was, kind of, we talked about this before, as like wrestling as a kid, and then
Yes.
get in the Marine Corps. It kind of builds that character. Yeah. So like I fished about 150 days between now and last summer. And I don't care what the temperature is. I'm getting out and I'm going after carp.
Yeah, and it's showing up in your results, man. So congrats. You really
Thanks.
put your head down and worked on it. And I'll tell you, we got a show coming out. I was just working on them the other day.
Hmm.
I recorded it a while ago, but excuse me. It's all about spot and stock fishing in
Mm.
the South Island of New Zealand.
Oh, okay.
And I think you'll really appreciate it because there's quite a bit of carryover
Hmm.
that you're talking about, but the biggest difference is he's fishing like 6X and for
Yeah.
monster fish, right? It's a little
Yeah.
crazy like that, but the same kind of thing because it's so light. You're like, I got to run after this thing, and then the other difference is like he might see one of those a day,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
The one shot,
Exactly one
right?
shot and that's it. And then some
Yeah,
days carping is like that. Only
yeah,
difference is I'm not fishing that 6X 2 pound. I'm fishing
uh,
20 pound four
yeah,
O's.
Flora, that's super abrasive, and yeah,
Yeah. Exactly.
it is funny because carp, a lot of people call them, hey, they're the permit of freshwater.
Oh.
And
Yeah.
it's funny because like you go permit fishing and you talked about the obstacles. Like
Yeah.
I've hooked up permit where they'll go run down and they run around a stick that's
Yeah.
a trapping stick or something, or there's a pipe in the water, or there's grass, or there's
Yeah.
the same
Reef or
thing. You're like
whatever.
you sit there and you stalk, 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 stalk. You finally get that eat, and you're like, oh my god, now I have to deal with the pipe and the stick and the
Yeah.
yada yada, and they're just so strong. It's like,
That's one thing that like when I first started, I was fishing like 2X 0X tippet, and I would spend sometimes over an hour or more stalking to find a carp. You hook them up, and then you'd lose them to an obstacle because your tippet would break.
yeah,
And I'm like, let me try 20 pound. And they're not super leader shy, and you're presenting, really presenting the fly to them, and they're not really seeing the leader. So I started going with the 20 pound tippet and having a lot more success of
yeah,
getting the fish to the net. Because carp are like, you hook them in the lip, their lips are super rubbery. So it's not like other fish, like, like a tarpon. When you hook a tarpon, you got
it's
to
a
like bury
bone.
that
Yeah,
hook in there. Yeah. And they'll shake it. Carp typically don't shake shake the hook free. Even I use barbless hooks too. So you don't have any problems with that. It's really the obstacles in the water that
yeah,
cause you to lose the hook. And
yeah,
if you're not using a strong enough hook, I've had carp that are,
and it,
yeah, they'll straighten the hook out, and you're like, oh, that was a 32 inch carp, and you
yeah,
straighten the hook out. So I use a lot of saltwater hooks. So
mm,
I use a lot of bonefish hooks, like the Gamakatsu SL45s are really good.
Mm-hmm.
And I started using recently like the Fulling Mill specific carp hooks called the Carp Bonio, but they're a lot denser and solid.
Yeah, they have a pretty decent gap on them.
Not too bad. Like I'll show you one right here. The Fulling Mills are, and these are size 8s. They're not crazy gap. They're pretty
Is that the
small hooks.
size you use? Is about a size 8?
Yeah, I use anywhere from like a 10, like if I'm fishing still water, to a size 4. So I don't know like how good you can see that, but yeah, it's not a
Put your
huge gap.
hand behind it like
Yeah.
this.
Let's see. My autofocus is turned off, so that's probably why you
Okay,
can't see
yeah,
it
it's
that
probably
well.
not
Yeah.
focused. But yeah, it's pretty
Yeah.
decent size. We get the idea. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, it's yeah, just I think the some of the challenges that I had to overcome were right, like figuring out how to understand how carp feed and move around in the water column and when's like an opportune time, right? Learning, you
Mm-hmm.
know, the flows and the water clarity and weather and then also the gear that you got to use, right? It's a lot of studying. So it was pretty cool. I found this book called Carp on the Fly. So a guy in Denver, he's like a carp king, is Barry Reynolds, and then another guy named Brad Beefus. They wrote a book. I think it was probably in the 90s, I want to say, 90s, early 2000s, called Carp on the Fly.
Uh-huh.
And it's like a 150-page book, but like that's what upped my game, man, was just really like studying
Yeah.
the sport and understanding how people that have been doing it for 40 years have been successful. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's been pretty cool. And then watching videos on Instagram really helps because you get to watch, different techniques. There's a cool guy named I think his name's Ryan Mock. He has a awesome channel called Sky and Reel,
Yeah.
where he's got his paddle board out. He's on a paddle board controlling a drone, doing all these overhead shots fishing for carp. I'm like, damn, man, carp fishing's hard enough. How do you do it
How are you
with the
doing all that?
drone and a
Right.
paddle board? It's not the easiest combo. But just watching his technique, there's like a patented technique for carp fishing, and it's the presentation. It's called the drag and drop.
Yeah.
So essentially, when you're casting out to the fish, you lift your rod tip high in the sky, and you're dragging the fly at the top of the water column.
Yep.
And then when you get into that feeding zone, you drop the tip of your rod down, and then the carp just slams it. So it's super effective, and my favorite technique that I like to use. But sometimes it's tough depending on the flows of the water. You don't necessarily get the best presentation.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
mhm.
So, question: have you met the authors of the book?
No, it's actually funny. The tournament that I'm competing in this weekend, Barry Reynolds is going to be one of the guys that I'm competing against. So I'm kind of pumped.
Yeah,
Go
that's
and
cool.
check out, do a little fanboy session. But
Yeah, that's right.
we've got a bunch of world class anglers here in Denver that
Oh, yeah.
target carp. So
A
it's
few.
yeah, a few like so. It's kind of funny. I joined the Trout Unlimited board for Denver Trout Unlimited here, and I
Mhm.
kind of make a joke that we should call ourselves Carp Unlimited because
Yeah.
we have more carp anglers than trout anglers. But
That's funny.
I've been able to learn from, there's a guy named Daryl Eakins. He's a Umpqua signature tire for carp patterns.
Yeah.
So he's on the board. So I'm learning a lot from him. And then my buddy Rick Mikesell, which is another, excellent uh, carp angler. He's been fishing the waterways here at South Platte for 20 something years. And he has a carp school that he teaches. And he takes you out on guided trips to fish for carp. So
That's cool.
having those guys to learn from, and then my buddy Nate, a Denver native that introduced me to carp fishing,
Yeah.
it's pretty impressive. Yeah.
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 Ears are buzzing because as you're talking about Denver and Trout Unlimited and the
Mhm.
carp, I know Scott from Lidrig passed you some gear. He just sent me a note
Yeah.
on text message saying, "Hey man, I got this
Yeah.
stuff that you sent me." Blah blah blah. So it's
Yeah.
funny. It's such a small world.
Yeah, Scott's an awesome dude. I hit him up because we were just sending out emails to find some product sponsors for Carp Slam, and he's like, "Yeah, man, you want to just come pick it up from my house?" And I'm like, he's a small home-based business, but
Yeah.
he's selling a bunch of product. And I'm like, yeah. So I show up to his house, and he pulls up with the golf cart. He's like, all right, we're going fishing. I'm like, where the hell are we going fishing with a golf cart? So he takes me out to the little pond behind his house, and we hop on his little fly craft, and it was like a guided trip for 90 minutes. He's sweating, paddling me around. It's about 98 degrees out, and we're carp fishing. It was pretty awesome.
That's
But
sweet.
Well,
Next time I come, I'm going to bring the blender and some pina coladas or something.
There you go. Yeah, exactly. We'll just have Scott row us around.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. How cool. Well,
yeah, man.
you got a lot going on there. I want to back up just a second because you said, hey, I've been fishing for carp, and at the start I was fishing, OX, 2X, and
Mm-hmm.
for a trout angler, that's heavy line. I mean, that's
Mm-hmm.
like as heavy as most of us go.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, well, now I'm going 20 pound. I'm curious to hear when you're connecting your fly, did that alter you or change you to some type of loop knot or something because the line is so heavy and it might alter the action of the fly, or was there any
Yeah.
change there?
So yeah, no, I still do an improved clinch knot, just like I would be tying if I'm tying a 5 or 6X, with a trout fly, with a 22 trout fly.
Mm-hmm.
So because you're not stripping for carp, right? You're not stripping, and you don't need the natural movement with the loop knot. Like a clinch knot is great because most of the time I'm high bank fishing and I'm dragging and dropping. I'm just kind of dropping it right down and having the weighted fly kind of sink into the column. So
Mm-hmm.
you don't really need the movement to necessarily, like the movement of the fly changing in depth in the water column is enough to get the carp to feed.
Okay.
And that's what's different about, throwing streamers, or if I'm going to throw some streamers for smallmouth, throw some leeches, yeah, definitely I'll go ahead and loop knot it so that
Yeah.
I can get more body and more movement for the fly. But that improved clinch knot works perfectly fine.
Yeah. It's not as much the action, but it's more the fact that it's there and they're getting that feeler out for
Exactly.
that vibration or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah, they have a pretty sensitive lateral line, and they've got barbells that extend on the bottom of their mouth, so they can feel vibrations in the water,
Mm-hmm.
and they have really good eyesight. So, you know, something that looks crayfish-like or crustacean or fish or bug-like that's moving up and down in the column, and they'll strike it.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you find curious just because of the vibration, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, the fly patterns that you use, are they typically a little more, best way I could describe it is like buggy? They have more extensions on them that like kind
I
of,
tie up the trashiest flies. Like, so here's one fly that's kind of works with me. It's just a marabou and some chenille, right?
yeah,
This is just kind of a crazy fly. It doesn't really look like a bug. It's got some lead eyes on it, and
yeah.
that works really well for me. Uh,
It's
nothing
trying to
nothing too
focus. There
special.
we
There we
go.
go.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
mean,
so
they
that's
almost look like saltwater shrimp flies, right?
yeah, exactly. And then here's like this is Daryl Eakins has that Detroit Mop City is kind of his patented fly.
Okay,
So this
there
is
you
like a
go.
mop fly. This is just my crappy version of tying what he ties. He's a lot better tire than me. But no, I don't really focus too much on making it match the hatch.
Yeah,
I
it's
find
more,
like yeah, like I like a lot of UV dubs, like buggy UV dubs with like small silly legs.
yeah.
And then I use medium lead eyes when the flows are heavy, because then I can get the fly down faster. And then a lot of times I'm fishing still water where there's kind of small pockets of still water in the river. I'll use bead chain eyes because they're not as loud when it hits the water, because carp
Mm.
have really good sense of hearing. So when you're fishing those heavy flies and the flows are low, the splash of the lead
The
weight
lead is too
hits the water,
much.
it's too much. So then I'll drop it down to bead chain, which it's different because your presentation has to change because the bead chain sinks at a slower rate than the lead
Slow. Yeah.
eyes. So you're casting a little bit further upstream to get it down in the zone, but you can make a quieter presentation. So
Mm-hmm.
it's really, I like to fish a lot of high contrast flies, stuff that I can see in the water. Right. So I love
Right.
blacks, olives, and rust colors because they contrast the riverbed.
Mm-hmm.
And the key to fly fishing for carp, right, is being able to see your fly and being
It's,
able to see when the carp eats the fly.
yeah,
Yeah,
the
when your
suck.
fly when your fly disappears, you can hook set. If you're
Yeah.
fishing in murky water, it makes it a lot more challenging. And that's when I go to like chartreuse colored flies because they stick
And they're
out better. I
really
can say
bright,
they're
right?
really bright. The carp can see it. You can see it. Yeah, yeah.
And it's interesting too because like if you fish for redfish, they
Hmm.
have a really big gill flare,
Hmm.
and you know when that eat is. But carp,
You don't
they
feel
don't
it.
have that gill flare like that. You
Yeah,
see it like disappear,
yeah.
right?
And one of the things with carp, like I'm not sure with redfish. I'm sure redfish have fish for them, but I don't know. They have teeth in their mouth. The carp don't have teeth in their mouth, so
Mm-hmm.
they just have that rubbery sucker mouth, and they actually have crushers in the back of their jaw, like kind of right in the gill plate area. And that's why you don't feel when a carp eats the fly because they just suck the fly in, and they have a really sensitive mouth to detect if it's food or not. And then in milliseconds they'll be able to suck the fly in and
Shoot it out.
immediately know, yeah, if it's food or not, and they spit it right back out. And because of that, like you got to have that, you got to be able to see them eat right so
Yeah.
that you can set the hook. And yeah, it's super important. So it's a little bit different than red fishing, but
Yeah. Now, with
Mhm.
carp, do you have a preference on trout setting or strip setting or?
Yeah, it all depends. Like if I'm high bank fishing and I'm kind of just swinging the fly out and I barely have any fly line out and I'm just dropping it down in the bank where I see something fishing, I'll just straight up hook set straight above. Yeah, strip set sometimes if I have more line out, right? Because if you have a lot of line out and you go to trout set, you got a
You're
lot of
just pulling the
slack.
line,
You're
yeah.
pulling the line off the water, right? So it's kind of situational based, but yeah, either one works. Strip set,
Yeah.
trout set, yeah,
That's kind
it's
of been my thing is like really I like to look at the angle off
hmm
of where the fly is.
hmm
If that angle is steep, I'm a
yeah,
little more of a trout set guy, but if it's
yep.
shallow, like strip and trout set, kind
Oh
of
yeah, I do
almost a
that a lot.
side set
Yeah,
kind of.
yeah. I'll just do like like a pull the line with my left hand,
Yeah.
lift the rod with the right hand, like as
Take a
far
few
as I
steps
can get it.
back.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, do whatever you can do. So
Now, most of my carp fishing has not been in moving water; it's been in still
okay,
water.
okay.
So, I'm curious to hear. I mean, I know you catch a trout in moving water that's big, and you got to chase it. It's a whirlwind.
Yeah,
There's a lot to contend with.
yeah.
Is that an occurrence that's pretty regular for you in moving water with
Oh yeah.
I would assume they run like crazy.
Oh yeah. It's you hook a let's say you got 150 CFS, you hook up a carp, they immediately shoot downstream. And it's like you got to tighten your drag pretty tight for those situations because they'll just run you down and
Yeah.
down and downstream, and you're running down the river chasing the carp, you know dodging obstacles in the water on the bank. So I like to keep my drag kind of tight. It is cool to have that
Yeah.
that spinning drag sound, but
It's a
sometimes you
lot of
get
work too.
sometimes you get in a hairy situation where your fly line's wrapped around stuff, and yeah, it gets pretty wild. And then we get in some crazy situations. My buddy Rick was telling me a story the other day where he was fishing from a bridge, and a lot of times, you find the fish, you feed the fish, and then you figure out how to land the fish,
Right.
right? I mean, this guy he drops his rod off of a 30-40 foot bush into
Oh.
trees by dropping his fly line down, and the next thing you know, his $1,000 rig is 400 yards downstream. So it's yeah, I like to keep the drag tight. As cool as the sound of the drag is, like keep that thing tight
Yeah.
so I don't have to do all the work. Let the reel
Yeah.
work for you.
And
So
you're running like a Dacron backing, I would assume. And then what do you run? Like 200 yards of backing on
yeah,
that?
I think I got like 150, 200 yards of backing on my reel. So I use the Cheeky Limitless 425. So it's like a 4 1/4 arbor. So it's pretty
Okay.
big. It's a large arbor
Yeah.
reel, and I use it for saltwater or carp. I just switch the spool out. So I like 100. I think I have 175 yards of backing on it. And then I have a bimini knot. I use a bimini knot to the fly line because it's a bigger fish.
Yeah.
And then I'll use just like a Rio's Trout Elite, like the weight forward
Okay.
floating 7 weight. And yeah, that's kind of the setup for the backing and the line. But and you got to change your fly line probably like every 8 to 12 months when you're fishing for carp in an urban environment, just
Yeah, because
because
you get wrapped and
you're
stuff.
getting wrapped and stuff, and it just yeah. Like I hooked up on a nice carp a couple weeks ago, and the next thing you know, my welded loop knot was busted. So
Mm,
then I'm just cutting that off, tying
nail
another
knot or
perfection lute or
something or
nail knot, and
perfection
then
knot.
yeah, and then the fly line's all sticky and nasty, and I washed it, and so you change it on a yearly basis. So,
That has
but
to be an interesting thing because you probably are fishing some water that's, got a little more pollution, got, oils and weird stuff in it and stuff
mhm.
in urban fishing. Do you clean your line more often because of that?
I
Or,
should, but I never do. I think
but
I've
you
cleaned
don't?
my carp like twice. Luckily here, like the Denver South Platte used to be like heavily polluted. Denver Trout Unlimited has done a good job. The city of Denver, Denver Parks and Rec, and have done also a great job of keeping the water clean. Like I think the highest like pollutant in our rivers currently is like E. coli, and then that comes from like all the goose poop and people walking their
Yeah.
dogs on trails. It rains, it washes into the river. But like we don't see too much oil. Like I reported a oil spill of benzene recently for a drainage ditch here, but luckily we do a pretty good job of keeping control of these heavy polluters here, like
Yeah.
the gas companies and wastewater treatment facilities and good old Coors. So Coors
Yeah.
their headquarters sits on Clear Creek, which runs into the South Platte here. So
Right.
they've been a big polluter here in
They're
this corridor for
all those Germans are like, get rid of those German Browns.
yeah. So, yeah, and it's but your line gets dirty. Like Carper's definitely harder. I use like Temple Fork Outfitters rods. I use an
Mhm.
Axiom 2 and a BVK, and
That
yeah,
BVK is a great rod.
I
Man.
love it.
What an
But
all rounder.
I've snapped the BVK 4 times on Carp.
Yeah.
Most of it was user error, like grabbing above the cork, you know. Yeah,
I got him.
just doing stupid stuff, and but yeah, exactly. They've got a good replacement program, so you need to pay the $25 or $40 to get a new tip.
Yeah.
It's not bad, so I keep extra on hand, and yeah, it definitely beats the gear up. Like the first carp rod or reel that I had, I was using a Reddington Rise, and it wasn't a sealed drag, and like I got gravel in it, and then reeling in a carp, I think it's an aluminum reel. It kind of
Oh, just
warped it.
eat
So
it.
then
Yeah.
yeah, so for like a month, I couldn't even use my reel. So I was like catching a fish and I'm stripping line and with a 10, 12 pound carp. It was brutal. And then I just went and upgraded to those cheekies. And man, I mean, they perform really well and they were super affordable.
Yeah.
And the colorways are pretty cool. So that's
Yeah.
kind of my go to. Yeah.
They do a good job. They do a
Yeah.
good job. The
Yeah.
other one I like, you mentioned rod warranties. I haven't found another one like it, but Douglas. I've worked with Douglas, and I really like their rods, especially their high end sky rods. They've changed a lot in the past couple of years. But long story short, you break a portion of the rod, and you just tell them, "I broke this section." They just send it to you.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
it's
and that's what TFOs is really good
so
with that.
awesome.
Like, and some of them you don't even need to use the warranty. I've realized that like ordering a replacement tip is faster than doing the warranty replacement.
Yeah.
And it's like I know like Sage is out there. It's like 6 months to get replacement parts
You're
through
like,
warranty. I'm like, for all that money, no, I want something that's going to come to me. Like I need it next week.
right, and they're like,
Yeah,
you putting that on like a flex machine to make sure it's like perfect. Like
yeah,
I don't know, the
yeah.
timelines are crazy, but
That is.
um, so you're fishing in and around Denver. Let's
Mm-hmm.
talk a little bit about what you kind of do from a research standpoint of like, hey, this is
Mm-hmm.
where I'm going to try and go and find fish because, like we said, it's applicable to Denver. You know that, but it
Mm-hmm.
took you a long time to figure it out. And if you were to go to any other city, I just have the feeling that Nick would be like, oh, I'm in Houston. I'd look at these 5 things and be like, okay, I'm going to go try here, here, and here.
Yeah.
So break that down for us so that we can get some people on
Yeah. So if
some
I'm
urban tigers.
waking up in the morning and like me and my buddy are going to go fish for carp, first thing I do, I look at stream gauges, right? So either USGS, there's a cool app called Trout Spotting that makes it a little bit easier to look at stream gauges, and I'll look at the temperature and the flow, right? So in an urban environment, when you get like above 150 to 200 CFS, that's going to create a lot of murk in the water because all the stuff from the banks and the trails and the sidewalks is going to wash in the water and dirty it up. So when it's kind of high, like 200, I'll try to find the spot, like below a confluence, like downstream of a confluence where it's a little bit slower, in the 75, 80 CFS because the water will be cleaner. There's not two waterways converging. And that's the first thing I do. So location based on temperature and flow, right?
Okay.
And we get water up to 80, 82 degrees here in the summertime,
Okay.
right? So it's advantageous for carp because they can feed in all different types of environment. I'll also look at the weather, right? Like trying to pick good weather windows. Like fishing for carp when it's overcast is really hard because you call them the golden ghosts, right? They really blend into the water and the substrate. We've got like a lot of fine granite and sand in Denver.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's super overcast and a little murky, it's going to be hard to spot the fish. So picking a day that's sunny, and that'll help me determine my location. And then setup on the water is super interesting. So what I'm looking for is like fast water, looking for those scenes where there's fast water and slow waters where carp can hop out of the fast water and feed and kind of hang out along the bank. They're eating on the rocks and
moseying along,
right? And once I determine that, also looking under structure, bridges, right? Bridges for shade if it's too hot outside.
Right.
Exactly.
And the invertebrates and bugs and stuff do that too.
The bugs are doing that. The crayfish are doing that, right? Exactly. And that's kind of another situation. So I'll get to the river, look at what I think is the most advantageous spot based on water flow and structure and and industrial structure like bridges, and then pick my spot. And then that's when I'll start targeting the carp, right? So when you're looking at carp, there's three categories of carp. There's cruisers, which are carp that are just kind of cruising up and downstream in a pod, not really actively feeding, just getting from point A to point B. There is tailors, which they're face down, actively mudding around in the water, tail out of the water, right? They're actively feeding on crustaceans and bugs.
Mm-hmm.
And then kloopers are the carp that are coming up to the top and just kind of kloop, like
Gulping.
sucking, gulping the water, feeding on. Typically, they'll feed on vegetation or any kind of topwater bugs. My favorites to go after are the tailors because it's a better hookup rate, better success.
Yeah, they're eating, right?
They're eating, right? They're not as spooky either because they have really good eyesight and really good hearing. So if they're face down in the mud and they're just mudding and making a mess in the river, they're not paying attention to you. You just come in, you drop that fly right in their mouth, and then you hold on for dear life. So
yeah, it's like picking up the tennis ball when your dog's eating his dinner.
Exactly.
He don't care.
He don't care. Exactly.
If he wasn't on dinner, he'd be following you around like crazy.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a good analogy, right? So yeah, that's kind of what I'm looking for. And then one of the other things that I look for too, if you have a bunch of carp like potted up and they're all feeding along a riverbank, right? I always target the downstream fish first because by going for the downstream fish, they typically shoot downstream once you hook them up. So if you hook them up, they shoot downstream. You can play them downstream away from the other fish because they're super spooky. Once a carp spooks, they'll spook the rest of them. And I've heard that they release like a pheromone or a chemical too when they're scared, which other carp smell, and that causes them to run away. But yeah, just kind of working your way upstream. There's some days where you'll see a line of 50 yards of fish, and you can start at the bottom and just kind of bang out 3-4 fish in a matter of minutes. And then there's other days where you can't get a carp to eat to save your life. So.
Right. And the line has to be like a game, right? Like, okay, how do I get this one? And then, all right, can I get the next one? How many can I, out of the 10, can I get 6? Can I get?
The hardest part of it is not like the fishing. It's like finding feeding fish is challenging, but then you're in an urban environment. The banks are covered in vegetation, right? So it's like, how do I cast my fly 10 feet away from me? When there's nothing but trees and bushes,
my bow and arrow,
and thistles. It's just like getting super creative to do that.
Swinging it, all kinds of stuff.
And like I've had days where I get a cast out in the tight window. The carp looks like it's about to eat. I think it's going to eat. Oh, it's in murky water, so I hook set. I miss the hook set. The fly comes out, hits a tree, and you go to cast it right back out, and then snap.
Right, or it rips a branch in the water.
It rips a branch, and then everyone's gone.
Right.
Yeah. So
I'll tell you, Nick, you got to try fishing for redfish.
Yeah, I'm going to do that in November. I'm going down to my in-laws live in Savannah, so I already booked a trip. I'm going to go out on a skiff and.
You're going to love it because it's very much like fishing for carp. Except for you typically, especially when you're in a boat, you don't have all the backcast issues. But you get a lot of those short shots because you're sometimes in murky water or in water that's not as clear, et cetera.
Yeah.
But the biggest difference is redfish wants to eat, it's going to eat.
Yeah. I mean, that's what it's like tarpon, carp, and redfish are kind of similar in how they approach. I just went tarpon fishing down in Mexico in May, and man, that was standing up high elevated on a skiff, seeing the fish rolling.
Yeah.
Strip, bam, you hook set. And
the big one with tarpon is, well, the big difference between the three of them is the hook sets, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Tarpon is like bone on a hook that just pray to God it gets into the boat, right? You should be thinking about losing fish and not landing fish.
Yeah. Well, so they say like 10% of the tarpon you see, you can get them to eat, and then 10% of the tarpon you get to eat, you'll get to the boat, and that was a fact. Like I think I landed 2 tarpon and probably lost 20 plus tarpon while I was down there.
It's absolutely crazy.
Absolutely frustrating and addicting, though.
Yeah. But the nice thing about redfish is you put it in a garbage can sized area, they're going to eat it for you, and you get really good hook sets.
Yeah, I'm super
As a saltwater angler, it's probably, in my opinion, one of the easiest and funnest to go after as a beginner and like really get a lot of experience in saltwater, sight fishing and things. Yeah. And it's going to help your carp fishing too,
Yeah.
because you can see all that and feel all that.
Yeah, three years ago I did do a redfish trip, but it was conventional tackle before I started fly fishing,
Mm.
and it was awesome just watching the shift in tide from high tide to low tide, and then the schools of redfish coming out of the cattails and weeds
Yeah,
to
yep.
feed. Oh man, I can't wait to do it on a fly rod. It's gonna be nuts.
Yeah, and the same thing. You have like cruisers, and then you have tailors.
Yeah,
And it's really neat. Yeah,
yeah.
a
So
lot of
super fun.
a lot of commonalities between carp and saltwater fish, the crushers and the way that
Yeah,
they eat and stuff. So it's really
yeah,
cool. Well, let's
definitely.
do this. We got a few minutes left. What I want to do is you become a wealth of knowledge in a short period of time from your studying and reading and being active on the water so many days.
Mhm.
Let's do this. If you could take the carp fishing scenario for you and say, look, here's the rod and reel and line
Mhm.
and setup that I use. And then let's talk about, okay, we talked about how you find the water. You did that. Let's talk about, okay, here's how I approach it now.
Mhm.
And then this is how I try to feed the fish.
Mhm.
And then once it's eating, this is my first objective and second, etc.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
just break it down so somebody can repeat it at home.
Yeah, so like you can fish with carp with a 5 weight, but if you want to keep replacing rods, I'll fish with a 5 weight.
Yeah.
I use a 7 weight, so I use Axiom 2 or TFO BVK. So I've got the BVK is a 10 foot, so I can get out a little bit further over brush, and I've got the 9 foot Axiom 2. So those are my go-to.
And that 10 foot for getting out of a brush is not only brush, but it's also probably your drag and drop
The
angle as
drag and
well,
drop angle helps. Yeah,
and getting away from currents and stuff because it's like
yeah.
nymphing, right? I mean,
Exactly. Like it's
okay.
a little bit slower action rod, so when you're casting big flies, you kind of crash down on yourself a little bit because there's a lot of flex in it. So like
Yeah.
yeah, but I'm not really double hauling too much. I'm really just swinging the fly out or dragging and dropping. So yeah, like 6 or 7 weight, 150 yard, 200 yards of backing on a large arbor reel. Like I said, that cheeky limitless 425 is 4.25 inches, so you can fit a lot of backing on it, and then you get that much more retrieve. Like it's like a whole other inch of line you're pulling in per retrieve
Mm-hmm.
versus a trout reel that's like 3.25. So yeah, big large arbor reel, definitely seal drag, because when you're urban fishing, you can get a lot of junk in there, so you want to keep it away from the drag system.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then we start talking. All right, I do a weight forward floating line, 7 weight line. Some people step up; they'll do a 7 weight rod, an 8 weight line, but you're not really casting that much doing double haul. So
Yeah.
match the line with the rod is fine. Weight forward and floating.
And you like
And
weight forward because you can get a little less line out and still have the line help you
yeah,
carry.
or if I need to cast, it's going to turn over right, and
Yeah.
it's just a little bit smoother.
Okay.
And I stick to natural colors, so I like to use like the Rio Rio Trout Elite. It's kind of like a greenish
Okay.
color that it kind of blends in, but it's more natural. I don't want to use like something bright orange because carp definitely can see. And
Bright
then for
lines.
yeah, bright lines, yeah. And then for leader, I just take I bought some Japanese leader on Amazon. It's pretty cheap, but I do or I just bought some fluoro, and I'll just do a perfection loop to loop, make my own leader, 25 pound, about 6 7 foot section of 25 pound,
So a
and then
little
I'll
more than an arm's length, like a
yep, a
full.
little more than arm's length, and then I'll blood knot it off to like another 3 to 5 foot section, depending on what type of water I'm fishing, with the 20 pound fluoro, and then just
In
like it,
fluoro because it sinks and it's more
it
abrasive.
sinks and it's more abrasive. It's just stronger than mono, right? And
Yeah.
you're going to be
Yep.
fishing through all kinds of stuff, so you want something strong. And
But
then
cleaning up. You guys are urban guys, right? So
yeah,
that
exactly, we
stuff
do a lot
doesn't
of
go away, man.
we
You
do
got
a
to
lot
make
of river
sure.
cleanups, and it's still back out there when we go back. So
Yeah, that's right.
yeah, and so yeah, like improve clinch knot to a fly. You can use just tons of carp flies. Like some of the popular ones are the Detroit Mop City. That's a really good carp fly. Carmen carp crawler, and then all kinds of random stuff that I make. I'm not a fly purist, so I tie up flies that I think are cool that'll work based on like UV properties and buggy properties with marabou. I use a lot of marabou or
Mm-hmm.
fox and UV dub. Anything of sorts with some type of weight, like medium lead eyes, or for softer presentations in slower or still water, B chain eyes. So it's kind
When
of go ahead.
when you do the lead eyes,
Mm-hmm.
do you pay attention to the color of the lead eye? Like, I mean, they can come in fluorescent colors, they can come in
I've
dolls.
done
Do you?
everything.
Okay. And do
Yeah,
you
I've
notice any
used
kind of difference because of the sight?
no.
No.
I
Okay.
tied up a fly to honor my Baltimore Ravens. I called it the
It
purple
was
people eater,
black
and
and
I had
gold. It was black and
yeah,
gold.
it was like yellowish gold eyes with purple and black. My buddy's like, "You gave me this fly. I can't catch a carp on it." I'm like, "I've caught 15 carp on that one fly." That like, it's the presentation that matters. So, but like my favorites to go to for high contrast are blacks and like a dark gray,
Okay.
medium lead eye, and then bead chain is either I use the silver bead chain or the black bead chain.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, yep, just high contrast.
It just changes the weight and whatnot. So,
Yeah.
and
And
your
then
sizes are, probably very little variance.
I'll
Three
use anything from
sizes.
a four to a 10,
Yeah.
depending on how big the fly is, and depending on if I'm fishing still water, I go down to like size 8, 10. It's for softer, quieter
Mm-hmm.
flies, and then the flies I use or the hooks I use are saltwater specific or the saltwater gamakatsu bonefish or the carp bonio fulling mills, which are just denser, stronger hooks.
Yeah. A heavier gauge hook.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Because
And
they do bend out on those fish. I mean, like you said, if you're really trying to put the wood to them, like that's your
yeah,
largest concern. Is
yeah.
often your
Oh,
hook. It's not your line. Because
yeah.
you're
Like
fishing, even if you're fishing OX, like you could bend out a hook. I mean,
100%. Yeah, it's happened. So it's yeah the fly selection. I'm not a purist. I say it again. Like
yeah.
whatever you think works. If it sinks, if it's got some type of buggy or fishy or crustacean like properties, go ahead with it. Don't focus too much on the fly. Focus on the presentation, right? And then another key piece is like what you're wearing is very important when you're in an urban environment fishing for carp. So don't be wearing neon sun hoodies that are pink
Don't
and
wear your
yeah,
urban clothes. Wear your
yeah, like wear something more muted. Like you're going hunting, right? We're going out. We're stalking a hunt. We just got our tag for carp. We're gonna
Yeah, that's right.
we got a guy that competes in the carp tournament. He's wearing a full ghillie suit, but I don't go that crazy.
Yeah, right.
I just do natural colors. And then get you a big net. Like I use the Fish Pond Nomad, like the medium length
Okay.
net. So it's a pretty big net because they'll
Yeah,
chew your
deeper
nets up.
basket too,
Yeah, deeper
probably.
basket. Yeah, yep. So you can get them in there, and like that's the basics. And obviously, learning the environment you're fishing in. So understanding how to read water, I think, is important like for any type of fly fishing that you're doing.
Yeah, let's talk about reading water for
hmm
for carp.
hmm
Is it similar, different in nature? I mean, I know it's a little different, but what are your thoughts on that regarding carp to like trout? I mean, we got a lot of
I
trout
mean,
out there.
like fish hang out in places that they're comfortable with, that they're not going to be preyed upon, right? So they like to hang on those seams of fast and slow water because they can eat in the slow water. It's easier to eat, but if they need to escape, they can get into the fast water in the current. So it's very similar in how the fish move about. The difference in trout and carp, I'd say, is that trout aren't as spooky as carp. Like you can spook one trout, you're not going to spook all the trout.
Mm-hmm.
And then trout typically are eating, mid column, tiny bugs or top water. Carp kind of they're more. I'd say like the trout are more predaceous predators
Mm-hmm.
in the way that they eat. Like they'll seek food out and move a good distance to eat food sometimes. But carp are like, all right,
They're like path oriented.
yeah, it's like they're more opportunists. Like, all right, if something flows downstream my way, I'm gonna eat it. Or if the bottom of the river is looking muddy and I think I can get some
I'll
bugs, like
root
they're gonna go.
around.
I'll root around, right? They're
Yeah,
not gonna. Carp typically don't move that 2 foot distance. They're not gonna
right.
follow a stream or 2 feet. Every once in a while you'll get that, but yeah, they're more opportunists. So the presentation is the key piece of that. And when you're fishing for carp, that drag and drop technique, there's a ton of cool videos on YouTube
Yeah.
to check out. But dragging that fly, you cast it out, you cast about a foot or two behind the carp or in front of the carp, and you're dragging the fly like perpendicular to the carp or over its back. You never want to drag it like directly towards his face because prey doesn't swim towards predator;
Right.
they'll spook. But you're dragging that fly high in the water column, and then right when you're about 6 to 8 inches away from him, you drop that rod tip, and you let the fly sink in the column, and
Yeah.
carp will chase it down and grab him.
And the thing
Yeah.
I found about carp that was a little different than trout was head orientation.
Mm-hmm.
They'll tend to turn a little more and stay oriented, slightly different than the stream flow because
Mm-hmm.
they're rooting around or whatever. Whereas trout, I find, are like they're just looking straight upstream, like that's it.
Yeah, yeah. The carp will move around, and if you see a carp coming up the bank and he's tailing, like sometimes you want to try to meet them. Like, all right, they're going to just kind of straight on a beeline to me. And the carp will be rooting. And then like, oh, I'm going
There's
to
your
turn around
fly.
and go the other way.
Yeah. You're like,
Or, like, I'm going to turn around the other way and go root the other way. So you're trying to reposition. So they're kind of unpredictable, but sometimes they are predictable.
You just described a permit, right? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. You're like,
big
how'd you...
eyes. They got those big eyes. They're like, 50 yards over there or something.
Yeah.
Like, you're like, dude, you were like 6 inches from my fly.
Yeah. It's and there's days that carp can see you from a mile away, and then other days they're just so focused on eating that you're literally, standing in the water and a carp bumps your foot. So
Yeah. Wow.
It's kind of you don't know what's going to happen when you're out there.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
If you had a tip for somebody that was going to, try and repeat what you're doing, like, I want to go carp fishing and get this started, check it out, do some urban stuff, like, what would that tip be?
I would say number one is I would read that book, Carp on the Fly, because I started carping before I read the book and I was doing a lot wrong and I was really frustrated because carping is one of those things, if you don't prepare and understand how to do it properly, it's like golf. You'll go out there one time and like, I hate this. I'm not good at it. Right. So consuming the knowledge and that Carp on the Fly book is kind of the key piece. Is reading that to understand how the fish eats and how they move and what to look for. And then you can go apply it to the water. And then honestly, man, it's, in our technology age, YouTube and Instagram, man.
Yeah.
Just watching different carp anglers on the fly. There's tons of instructional videos on the drag and drop technique. Go look at those to understand how to present the fly because it's so different than trout fishing. If you think you're going to go out and throw an indicator and a squirmy worm and, drift the fly through a seam, right? You'll probably catch carp, but you're most likely going to snag them as the fly is running through, right? Because if, carp's feeding upstream and there's just a fly floating at the same plane coming straight at their face, they're going to move out of the way, right? And that's, knowledge is key. Like find a carp angler on Instagram is a cool thing. Ask questions. That's what I was doing. Find some local carp anglers, try to meet up with them on the water. And if you have a guide service that does carp like we do in Denver, then go do that.
Go do it for a day. Yeah.
Oh, 100%. Like it's worth its weight in gold to understand it because it's a very frustrating fish to catch, but super rewarding once you put the preparation in and understand how to get them on the line.
And guides to me are like carpentry, right?
Yeah.
You take a piece of wood and you start to change it and you ask questions and you do things and it's like instant gratification. You get knowledge immediately. So
it's like when I first started golfing, I didn't take golf lessons. So I was awful. I'm still bad at golf.
Yeah.
But then I took a lesson and I'm like, oh, I can hit the ball a little straighter.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with fishing, right?
Like
if you're going to do something
one look at you and he's like, oh,
yeah.
Why are you holding that way?
Exactly.
Like, because it looks like a baseball bat.
Exactly. So it's the same type of investment, man. Like, if you got carp guides around you, do that. If not, then power of social media and the internet will help you prepare. But that book is definitely my top recommendation.
All right, cool. So Nick, how do people get a hold of you if they want to get a hold of you? Your Instagram handle. Remind us what that is.
It's just at Midnight Ceviche. So like midnight and then ceviche like the dish. It's a funny story behind that. We were fishing the toilet bowl up in Basalt here in Colorado. It's like a famous place, and the fish eat micey shrimp. Right, that's all the fish eat. You're just sitting there drifting, catching these trophy trout. And my buddy was like, "Oh, I'm out here with midnight ceviche," because we were throwing shrimp patterns. It was midnight outside, and I just kind of took that and embraced it, and that's what that changed it to my Instagram. He was giving me the nickname, so I was honored because this is a great angler here in Colorado, and he knighted me with the name. So
very cool.
Yeah.
Well, it was great having you on the show, Nick. People want to get a hold of you, they can get a hold of you on Midnight Ceviche here on Instagram. Feel free. You're an open book, obviously, but we wish you the best of luck this week in the slam and
appreciate it,
jamming some stuff out. I hope you go wrangle up some of those guys that created the book and show them, hey, there's some new guys in town, man. So
I'll bring my book and my Sharpie and be a little fanboy, and then hopefully I can beat him in the carp slams.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, good talking to you, man. We'll see you guys next week. That's it for us this week on Carp, and we'll continue to get some good shows. Subscribe to the show. Check us out on YouTube if you want to see this live. But that's it for this week. We'll see you.